It was a cold evening when the door to my lab opened without warning. I wasn't expecting anyone, not that day, not any day, but there he was. Alether. I had heard of him, of course. He was an alien noble, known across the galaxy for his ruthless efficiency and immense wealth. He controlled vast territories, and rumors said his word could bend the will of entire star systems. But what struck me the most was how ordinary he looked standing there, in my small, dimly lit lab. His tall figure was imposing, yes, but his eyes, those were cold, calculating. He wasn't here for pleasantries. "I've brought you something," he said, voice as flat as his expression. I didn't know whether I should be flattered or frightened. He barely looked at me as he stepped aside, revealing what he had brought. A woman. Paralyzed, sitting in a futuristic wheelchair with intricate alien designs, her body rigid but her eyes alive with something more than mere consciousness. Her pale skin shimmered faintly in the lab's artificial lights, a soft glow that contrasted sharply with the harshness of the room. I glanced at Alether, waiting for him to explain. He spoke again, his tone dismissive, almost as if this were some trivial transaction. "This is Irith," he said, almost as if it were an afterthought. "She is a burden, an experiment gone wrong, and now I am passing her to you. Fix her, or dispose of her. Your choice." Irith. The name sounded almost like a whisper, fragile, like the person herself. But I wasn't concerned with names right now. What did he mean by dispose of her? What had this woman been through? Alether moved towards the table, placing a device in front of me. It was sleek, metallic, and glowing with a strange blue light. I didn't recognize the technology. It was far beyond anything I had worked with before. "Her condition is beyond conventional treatment. Perhaps you'll find your science useful here," he said, not bothering to explain further. "But you should know something else. She was once royalty, a failure, discarded by her people. You are to see if she has any use left, but I do not believe she does. She is broken." There was a pause. I felt the weight of the silence, the strange chill in the air. Irith hadn't said a word since entering the lab. Her eyes locked with mine, a depth to them that hinted at far more than I was prepared to see. And despite Alethar's cold words, I felt something stir inside me. A curiosity. A need to know more. Alether turned to leave, but before he could step out of the door, he paused, looking back at me. "Do not fail," he said, his voice turning dangerously sharp. "If you waste my time, there will be consequences." And just like that, he was gone. His footsteps echoed down the hall, leaving me alone with her. Irith. I stood there, unsure of what to do next. My mind raced, dissecting everything Alether had said. A failed royal experiment? Was she really broken? Or was there something more? I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about fixing her body. It was something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. I stepped closer, to Irith, hesitant. The hum of the machines around us seemed louder now, almost deafening. She didn't flinch, didn't move. Her gaze never left me, but there was no malice there, no fear, only something unreadable. I could tell she wasn't just some project. There was more to her story, and I was about to uncover it. But first, I needed to figure out what Alether had truly left behind in his cruel gift. "Hi," I said softly, trying to break the silence. "I'm Raven. I don't know how to fix you yet, but I'll try." She didn't respond. But for the first time since Alether left, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't about fixing a broken woman. Maybe it was about understanding what had truly been done to her, and why her very existence felt so important. And as I studied her, something else dawned on me. She wasn't just a failure, as Alether had claimed. She was a mystery, one I couldn't ignore. And I was about to be pulled into a web of secrets that could change everything I knew about the universe. The first few days with Irith were quiet. Too quiet, in fact. She remained almost motionless, her eyes scanning the room with a quiet intensity. I tried to engage with her, talk to her, learn her history, but she said nothing. Her silence was a constant presence in the lab, more suffocating than comforting, but in those days, I could tell that beneath her stillness, something stirred. There was more to her than met the eye. I could feel it. My focus was on the device Ilither had left me with, a small, sleek instrument that seemed to hum with a strange, almost sentient energy. It had a network of circuits and symbols etched into its surface, none of which I could make sense of at first. Yet there was a logic to it. I could almost hear it calling to me, pulling at my thoughts. After several hours of examining the device, I decided to connect it to Areth. I felt an odd sense of trepidation as I gently placed the interface against her chest. Her body stiffened, her breath shallow but even. I glanced at her face, her lips slightly parted as if in a silent plea. She wasn't entirely unresponsive, but it was clear she had no power over what was happening to her. The device clicked into place, and I felt a surge of energy pulse through the air. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The hum of the device grew louder, filling the room with a low, vibrating thrum. And then, silence. For a moment I thought it had failed, but then, slowly, her hands twitched. Her fingers, once locked in place, began to move. It wasn't much, just a subtle flicker of motion, but it was enough. My heart skipped a beat. Ireth had responded. I pulled back, my hands shaking slightly from the intensity of the moment. I looked at her, waiting for any sign that this was more than a mere fluke. Her eyes, which had been vacant just moments before, were now sharp, focused. On the interface on her chest, Ireth? I spoke her name softly, not knowing what to expect. Can you hear me? Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time, her voice, soft, weak, came through. Yes. It was barely a whisper, but it sent a shockwave through me. Ireth's voice was as broken as her body, but there was something undeniably powerful in the way she spoke, something hidden beneath the frailty. I looked at the device again. This was no ordinary alien technology. It was far more advanced. It wasn't just designed to interface with the human body. It was connected to something much older, some force, some knowledge, buried deep inside her. I wasn't just dealing with a paralyzed woman. I was dealing with an enigma, a legacy wrapped in silence. The next few weeks were spent in silence as I carefully monitored Ireth's progress. Each day, I'd connect her to the device, watching as she responded in small, barely noticeable ways. Her muscles, stiff from years of disuse, started to relax. Her hands, once clenched in place, were now able to form loose fists. Her legs, still paralyzed, responded to her mental commands, twitching slightly as if attempting to move. There was something more, though, something in her gaze, an intensity, a clarity that I had missed in the beginning. She wasn't just regaining control of her body. It was as if she was tapping into a power that had been locked away. It wasn't just the alien technology. It was her. She was far more than what Elithar had led me to believe. And then came the first true breakthrough. It was late one evening when I noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Ireth had been staring out the window, her gaze distant, almost as if she were lost in thought. I had been working on the device, adjusting its settings when I felt it, a surge of energy. It wasn't from the device, it was from her. I turned, around just as she exhaled sharply, her body tense, and then a faint but unmistakable light flickered from her eyes. The room seemed to hum with a strange resonance. Her eyes locked with mine, and for the first time, I saw something other than emptiness. I can feel it, she whispered. I can feel everything. It was the first real connection I had made with her. The first time I had truly understood that she wasn't broken. She was locked in, and whatever Elithar had done to her was only scratching the surface. I took a step forward cautiously. What do you feel? What's happening? She looked at me, her expression unreadable, but there was something like recognition in her gaze, something that spoke of ancient knowledge, of power long buried beneath the surface. I don't know, she said, her voice trembling. But I think I've been waiting for you, for this, for a long time. I didn't know what she meant, but in that moment I felt it too. A stirring, a connection between us that went far beyond the science of it all. This wasn't just about healing her body. This was something far greater, something that could change everything. Ireth wasn't just a paralyzed woman, she was a key, a doorway to something beyond our understanding. And I was beginning to realize that the path I was on with her wasn't just one of science. It was one of discovery, of unlocking powers that the galaxy had long forgotten. And as I stood there, watching her, I knew I was no longer just a scientist. I was a part of something much larger. The truth was out there, waiting for us to uncover it. The days blurred into each other as I continued my work with Ireth. The more I learned about her, the more I realized there was far more hidden beneath the surface than I could ever have imagined. Her paralysis, her silence, her apparent fragility, none of it made sense. Every new discovery only deepened the mystery, and as I began to dig into her past, I found myself pulled further into a web of secrets that even Ireth herself didn't fully understand. It was late one night when I found the first real clue. I had been working on deciphering the strange markings on the device Ilither had left behind. The symbols, though complex and foreign, seemed to have a certain rhythm to them, a hidden logic that I was beginning to understand. As I activated the device and connected it to Ireth once again, I noticed a faint pulse of light in her chest, where the interface met her skin. This time it was different. It was as though the light was trying to communicate, trying to tell me something. Ireth, I said softly, moving closer. Do you know what this means? She didn't speak at first, but the soft hum from the device grew louder, resonating in the air. I could see her eyes, bright, searching, as if trying to reach something deep inside herself. I can feel it, she whispered. It's a part of me. But I don't know what it is. The light from her chest flickered again, more intensely this time. Without thinking, I accessed the data embedded in the device, tapping into a series of encrypted files that had been hidden away for centuries. The symbols started to make sense, and what I uncovered shocked me to my core. The device wasn't just an interface, it was a key to unlock the secrets of an ancient and highly advanced alien civilization, the same civilization that had created Ireth. Her people, the Talarian Empire, were not just a race of conquerors. They were the keepers of a forgotten knowledge, an ancient power that had been sealed away for millennia. But what truly struck me was the revelation that Ireth wasn't merely a byproduct of their experiments. She was their heir, the last of her line, a line that had been erased from history. The Talarian Empire had once ruled the galaxy, spreading their influence across countless worlds, but their reign ended abruptly, consumed by their own ambition. Their greatest creation, an artifact of unimaginable power, had been hidden away, its location lost to time. But there was a catch. The artifact could only be activated by one of the royal bloodline, and Ireth, it seemed, was the only one left. Who could do so? The truth of her heritage hit me like a wave, drowning me in the enormity of it all. Ireth wasn't just an alien noble, cursed to live in a fragile body. She was the key to a power that could reshape the galaxy, if she could unlock it. Ireth looked at me, her expression filled with confusion and fear. What does this mean? Raven? What am I? I shook my head, still reeling from what I had uncovered. Ireth, you're more than you know. You're the last of the Talarian royal line. Your people, they didn't just cast you aside. They erased you from history because you were too dangerous. Your bloodline holds the key to a power that could bring them back, or destroy everything. The realization sank in, leaving a heavy weight on my chest. It explained why Ilither had treated her like an object, a burden to be disposed of. He hadn't just seen her as a failure, he'd seen her as a threat to the empire he had built upon the ashes of the Talarian civilization. Ireth's hands trembled as she processed the information. But I don't know how to use this power. I don't even understand what it is. Neither do I said, my voice low, but we will figure it out, together. I was no longer just trying to heal her body. I was trying to help her understand what she was and what she could become. But with that understanding came a terrifying truth. The power she held was not something that could be controlled easily. It was ancient and volatile, bound to the very fabric of the Talarian legacy, and if it fell into the wrong hands... I glanced at the device in my hands, knowing full well that whatever path we chose next, we couldn't go back. The Talarian Empire might have fallen, but the knowledge they left behind was still alive, waiting to be unlocked. Irith was not just a victim of their mistakes, she was their future, and the galaxy's. Whether she liked it or not, her destiny had already been written long before she had ever met me. But what if we couldn't control it? What if this power was too dangerous to wield? I couldn't answer those questions. All I knew was that the clock was ticking, and Alether was not the only one searching for Ireth. There were others who would stop at nothing to find her, and use her for their own purposes. Irith might have been erased from history, but she was not forgotten. And now, the entire galaxy would know her name. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Irith and me grew. Each new discovery about her abilities only made her more of a target, and I could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. We were no longer just two people in a lab. We were fugitives, running from forces we barely understood, and yet neither of us could escape the inevitable truth that was emerging. Irith was no longer just a woman in need of saving. She was the key to an ancient power, one that had the potential to change everything. Despite the quiet progress we made, the shadows grew darker with every passing moment. I could feel it, the watchful eyes, the quiet hum of danger that lingered in the air. Ireth's abilities were becoming more pronounced. The alien technology in her body was resonating with something far older and far more dangerous than either of us could comprehend. And every time she tapped into that power, it felt as though the universe itself was shifting, responding to her presence. But it wasn't just the power that was dangerous. It was the people who wanted it. Alether, I was beginning to understand, was merely the beginning of a much larger game. It came one afternoon, just as I was working in my lab, running some simulations on the device, that the alarms went off. "Raven!" Irith's voice echoed through the hallways, strained with panic. "They found us!" I rushed out of the lab, heart pounding. Ireth was already standing by the window, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Her fingers twitched at her sides, and I could feel the energy swirling in the room. She had tapped into it again, and I knew she could sense something I couldn't. A threat approaching fast. I joined her at the window, my breath catching as I saw the shadows moving across the landscape. Figures cloaked in dark uniforms, their movement precise and deliberate. I could see the insignia on their arms, the mark of Zenithar, Alether's most loyal military faction. They were the elite, ruthless, calculating, and relentless. The very ones tasked with keeping Irith under control. "They're here for me," Irith whispered, her voice tight. "They know what I am, what I can do." I clenched my fists, trying to calm the rage building inside me. "We can't stay here. We need to leave, now." Before I could take a step, the door burst open with a violent crash, sending the entire room into a frenzy of motion. 2 soldiers stormed in, their guns drawn, eyes locked on Irith. The energy in the room grew heavy as Irith's powers flared, her body glowing with a faint light. The soldiers hesitated, sensing the danger. "Step away from her, Raven," one of the soldiers commanded, his voice cold and unyielding. "She's coming with us." Ireth's eyes flicked toward me, and for a split second, I saw something in her, something beyond fear. There was a spark of defiance, a quiet understanding. She wasn't afraid anymore. She knew what needed to be done. "You're not taking her," I said firmly, stepping between the soldiers and Ireth. "Not while I'm still breathing." The soldiers exchanged a brief, tense glance before one of them raised his weapon. The barrel pointed directly at me. We don't want to do this, the soldier said, but his voice lacked conviction. Move aside. Ireth moved beside me, her expression unreadable, and for a moment everything seemed to pause. The world around us held its breath. I felt the pulse of energy growing stronger within her, radiating from her body like a star. Coming to life. I won't let you take me, Ireth said quietly, her voice gaining strength. Not anymore. Before I could stop her, she reached out with a single hand, her fingers trembling as she tapped into the energy coursing through her. The temperature in the room dropped, and the air hummed with an unnatural force. The soldiers froze as if an invisible barrier had surrounded them. I could feel the power she was unleashing, the raw potential she held. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. The soldier nearest to me hesitated. Don't do it. You don't understand what you're dealing with. But Ireth's gaze was unwavering. I understand enough. In a flash, the energy surged forward, blasting the soldiers back into the wall with an explosion of light. The impact left them unconscious, crumpled on the floor. I stood there, still reeling from the force, as Ireth slowly lowered her hand, her breath coming in shallow gasps. That was too much, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Ireth's expression softened, but the fire in her eyes didn't fade. It wasn't enough, she replied, her voice steady. But it will be soon. We had crossed a line. I knew that now. There was no going back. Ireth had unlocked something within herself, something ancient and powerful, but we had just made ourselves the most wanted targets in the galaxy. I helped her to her feet, my mind racing. We need to leave. This place isn't safe anymore. But as we turned to make our escape, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. It wasn't just Ilither's soldiers coming for us now. The entire galaxy would be looking for Ireth. She was no longer just a lost heir to an empire. She was the weapon, the key, the future of an ancient civilization that had fallen, and the powers that had once ruled the stars would stop at nothing to reclaim it. The question now was, could we survive long enough to figure out what Ireth's true destiny was? And would she be able to control the power that could either save or destroy everything? We didn't have time to process what had just happened. The echoes of the blast still reverberated through the walls of the lab as I helped Ireth move toward the exit. The weight of our situation pressed on me, suffocating me in ways I had never felt before. The soldiers, now unconscious, had been only a small part of the larger game we had become entangled in. The sirens growing louder outside only served to remind me that we were running out of time. Ireth's breathing was shallow but steady. Her eyes remained focused, though I could see the toll the release of power had taken on her. The energy she had unleashed earlier had been intense, but it wasn't without consequence. She staggered slightly as she walked, her limbs weak from the strain. We need to keep moving, I said, my voice urgent. They'll be back with reinforcements soon. Ireth didn't respond immediately, her gaze distant as though she were searching for something beyond the chaos around us. I knew that look all too well. She wasn't just reacting to the situation. Something inside her was changing. She was awakening to something far greater than herself. I can feel it, she whispered, barely audible over the growing noise of the approaching forces. The power, it's growing inside me, but I don't know how to control it. It's like it's pulling me in different directions. I nodded, understanding the fear in her voice. It wasn't just the fear of losing control, it was the fear of becoming something she couldn't understand, something that might consume her. I had seen this before, though not in the same way. Power, when it was uncontrollable, was a dangerous thing, and what Ireth held within her was unlike anything I had ever encountered. We'll figure it out, I said, trying to reassure both of us, though I wasn't entirely sure how. We need to get to safety first, then we can take a moment to breathe. But as we moved through the corridors of the facility, the urgency of our situation continued to build. We couldn't run forever. Eventually, the people after us would catch up, and Ireth's abilities, her true potential, were both our greatest asset and our greatest danger. We reached the underground escape route I had prepared in case things went wrong. The hatch was hidden behind a false wall in the lab, a precautionary measure I had designed when I first set up the facility. It was far from ideal, but it would take us to a safe location on the outskirts of the city, at least temporarily. I set the access code into the terminal, and the hatch slid open with a quiet hiss. The cool air that rushed up from below was a welcome relief from the stifling tension in the lab. I motioned for Ireth to follow me, but she hesitated, her hand gripping the edge of the doorframe. "I can't," she began, her voice strained. "I don't want to run anymore. I don't want to keep hiding from them." I stepped toward her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Ireth, you have to trust me. Right now we have no choice. We can't face them head on until we know what we're dealing with. The world we're about to enter isn't the same as the one we left. We're both in this together." Ireth's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw the same flicker of uncertainty I had felt when I first encountered her. But then, something changed in her expression. The fear slowly faded, replaced by resolve. "You're right," she said, her voice stronger now. "But once I understand what this is, Raven, I won't hide anymore. I'll make them pay." The fire in her eyes made my heart race. It wasn't just anger or revenge that burned there. It was something deeper. She wasn't just angry at Elithor or Zenithar anymore. She was angry at her own people, for what they had done to her, for what they had tried to make her into. I nodded, my mind still racing. "We'll face it together. We'll figure out how to control this. But we need time." I helped her through the hatch and we descended into the darkness below. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for us to move side by side, but it was far from silent. Every step we took felt like a heartbeat in the quiet underground space, but the stillness didn't last long. Ireth's power continued to grow within her, and I could feel the tension in the air. It was as if the very tunnel around us responded to her presence, vibrating with an unseen force. I couldn't explain it, but I felt the energy surging in her every step. And as we walked deeper into the unknown, I realized just how much she had already changed. It wasn't just her body, it was her mind, her soul. She was awakening to something that had been dormant for too long. And I had to wonder, could we truly control it? Could Ireth learn to wield this power without becoming the very thing she feared? The further we went, the more I could feel her presence expanding, her energy crackling in the air. But I could see the strain in her eyes. It wasn't just physical fatigue, it was emotional. The power inside her was like a beast, untamed and wild, and she didn't know how to keep it from tearing her apart. Finally, we reached a small, hidden safe house, a place I had set up for emergencies. It wasn't much, but it would provide us with the shelter we needed. I stepped inside first, then turned back to help Ireth. But before I could take another step, a sudden force, stronger than before, burst from her. The air around us seemed to warp, and I could see the faint outlines of energy swirling around her like a storm. Ireth collapsed to her knees, her hands gripping the ground as if she were holding on to something, anything, to stay grounded. Raven, her voice was weak now, strained. "I can't control it anymore." I rushed to her side, my heart racing. This wasn't just a momentary lapse. This was something deeper, something I didn't fully understand. But as I looked at her, something inside me shifted. I knew we didn't have much time. Whatever was awakening inside Ireth, whatever power she had yet to understand, it was growing faster than I could keep up with. And in that moment, I realized we weren't just fighting to survive. We were fighting to control the very essence of the galaxy itself. The night air outside the safe house was thick with tension. Ireth was still recovering from the overwhelming surge of energy that had burst from her. I had managed to help her stabilize, but it wasn't enough. The power she held within her was beyond anything I had prepared for. The strain of controlling it was evident, her breathing shallow, her hands trembling. We were running out of time. I knew the soldiers of Zenithar would not rest until they had her, and Ireth's powers, raw, untamed, were only drawing them closer. What had begun as a series of small incidents, an unplanned escape, a broken resistance, was now spiraling into something far larger. And Elithar, that cold-hearted ruler, wasn't done with us. He would stop at nothing to reclaim Irith, even if it meant destroying everything in his path. We couldn't run anymore. No more hiding in the shadows, no more waiting for the right moment. It was time for us to face him, to confront the reality that we could never go back to the way things were. But it wasn't just Elithar we were up against now. The more Irith's power manifested, the more I understood. Her abilities weren't just about surviving. She was the key to a much greater war, a war that had been waged in the hidden corners of the galaxy for centuries. And Elithar, in his hunger for power, had awakened a storm he could not control. I could see the fear in Irith's eyes as she stood at the window, staring out into the vast night. The city beyond was alive with lights, but it felt more like a cage closing in around us. It wasn't just the soldiers that threatened us now. The very power Irith carried threatened to consume her. "We can't keep running, Raven," Irith said, her voice low, the weight of her words heavy. "I can feel them getting closer. I can feel Elithar's presence even from here. I don't know if I can control this anymore. What if I can't stop it?" I moved to stand beside her, looking out into the darkened horizon. My mind raced, but I knew one thing for certain: running wasn't an option. The power inside Irith was not just an obstacle, it was the solution. It was time to stop hiding. It was time for her to embrace who she truly was. "You can control it," I said, my voice steady though doubt twisted inside me. "We've come this far together. You've already begun to unlock parts of yourself you didn't even know existed. You're not alone in this. I'll help you." She turned to me then, her eyes filled with determination, though tinged with fear. "But what if it's too much for me? What if it's too dangerous?" I stepped closer, placing my hand on hers, feeling the faint tremor in her fingers. "We won't know until we try. You don't have to do this alone. We'll face Elithar together, and you'll have control. I believe in you." Irith's gaze softened, her fear now mingled with a quiet resolve. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "All right, but we need to be ready. We can't let him control us anymore." I nodded. "Then let's get ready." The plan was simple. We would face Elithar on our terms. I had arranged for an old ally of mine, Callan, a former mercenary turned rebel leader, to meet us at a location just outside the city. Callan had the resources we needed: weapons, intel, and a plan. But even with his help, I knew this wouldn't be easy. Elithar had an army at his disposal, and Irith's powers, though growing, were still wild and uncontrollable. But we had no other choice. We moved quickly through the underground tunnels, our hearts pounding in our chests. Every footstep echoed. In the dark, every breath felt heavy in the silence. We were getting closer to Callan's hideout, and with each step, the gravity of the situation settled deeper into my bones. This was it. There was no turning back. As we neared the hideout, Callan's men were already in position. They greeted us in silence, nodding grimly, understanding the stakes. Callan, a tall, scarred man with a voice like gravel, was waiting for us at the front of the group. "You came," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years spent fighting wars and losing battles. "I didn't think you'd make it this far." "We didn't come this far to turn back," I said, stepping forward. "We're going to stop Elithar, no matter what it takes." Callan nodded. "Then we're with you. We've been preparing for this moment for years. Elithar may have an army, but we have something he doesn't: the element of surprise." We quickly discussed the plan. The rendezvous point was an abandoned facility on the outskirts of the city, a place that Elithar had used in the past to house his military operations. We would infiltrate the facility, fight through his forces, and confront him in person. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only way to ensure Irith's safety and the safety of the galaxy. As we made our way to the facility, the night grew colder. The air was thick with anticipation, and with each passing moment, the fear I had buried deep inside me began to surface. We were walking into the heart of Elithar's empire. He had no intention of letting us leave alive. But this wasn't just about survival. It was about control. We arrived at the facility just as the first lights of dawn began to break over the horizon. The sky above was dark and foreboding, as though the universe itself knew what was about to unfold. I turned to Erith one last time. "Are you ready?" She looked at me, her expression unreadable, but her eyes, those eyes, were filled with something fierce, something I hadn't seen in her before. "I was born ready," she said, her voice steady. "Let's finish this." And together we walked toward the storm. The battle had been fierce. We had fought through Elither's forces, each step forward taking everything we had, every ounce of strength, every bit of power Ireth could harness. The air had been thick with smoke and the sharp crackle of energy. Weapons, the cries of combat echoing across the empty, war-torn facility. But we had won. Against all odds, we had torn through his army, and now, standing in the heart of what had once been Elither's stronghold, we faced him. Elither stood before us, his face twisted with fury and disbelief. His eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, flickered, with the unmistakable realization that he had underestimated us, underestimated her. "You think you've won, Ereth?" Elither sneered, his voice like ice. "You, the last of a failed dynasty, the broken heir to a dead empire. You think you can stand against me?" Ireth stepped forward, her presence now radiating with an energy I had never felt before. Gone was the frightened woman I had once known. In her place stood something far more powerful, far more dangerous. The raw power she had struggled to control now flowed freely from her, and I could feel it crackling in the air between us. Her eyes, once uncertain, now burned with a fierce intensity, a fire that could not be quenched. "I'm not just an heir," she said, her voice steady, echoing through the chamber. "I'm the future, and you are nothing." Elither's lips curled into a mocking smile. "The future? Your people have long since crumbled. There is nothing left of the Talarian Empire but ashes. And those ashes," Ereth continued, "will rise again, but this time, I will control the fire." With a sharp motion, Ereth raised her hand. A surge of energy pulsed outward, wrapping around Elither in a shimmering wave of power. The room trembled, the very walls shaking as the force emanated from her. Elither's smug expression faltered for a brief moment, but then, with a roar, he thrust his own power forward, an attempt to match hers. The two forces collided in mid-air, the impact sending a shockwave through the facility. The ground beneath us cracked, sending debris flying, but neither Ereth nor Elither relented. For a moment, it felt as if the entire world had paused, holding its breath as the two powers clashed. But then, something changed. Ereth's power began to grow. I could see it, see the light in her eyes as it intensified. The force she had once feared now flowed freely, and Elither's strength, though formidable, faltered against it. Slowly she inched forward, her hand steady, her will unwavering. The power that had once been a burden was now a weapon, and she wielded it with precision, with purpose. With a final, decisive gesture, Ireth released a burst of energy that shattered Elither's defenses. The blast sent him flying backward, crashing against the far wall with a force that rattled the foundations of the building. For a moment, he lay still, his body crumpled against the rubble, his armor shattered. Ereth stood over him, breathing, heavily but unbroken. She had won. But it wasn't just the defeat of Elither that marked the end of this battle. It was the realization of what Ireth had become, what we had both become. This wasn't just a war for survival anymore. It was a fight for control, for the future of a galaxy that had forgotten the power it once held. And in that moment, Ereth wasn't just a survivor, she was the catalyst for a new era. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Ereth turned to me, her expression softening. The storm in her eyes had quieted, and in its place was something new, something beautiful. "You did it," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're not just the future of the Talarian Empire. You're the future of all of us." Ireth smiled, a small, tentative smile that spoke volumes. I never knew what I could be until you showed me. I never understood that the power was always inside me. I had to embrace it. Together, we turned and walked toward the exit, the ruins of Ilithar's stronghold left behind us. The sun was rising over the horizon, casting a golden light on the war-torn land. The galaxy was changing, and we were at the center of it all. We had fought, we had won, and now we had a new path ahead of us, a path that was ours to create. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Ireth and I knew one thing for sure: we would face it together. As we stepped into the light, I could feel it, the beginning of something new. The power she had unlocked wasn't just for destruction, it was for creation, for change, for a new world where the past no longer controlled us. Ireth's destiny was no longer tied to the fall of the Talarian Empire. It was now a future that she would shape, a future where she would be the one to lead, and with her by my side, I knew we could face anything that came our way. Because together, we were unstoppable.